What does effort mean to you? As we explored this episode, to keep this in mind, because something I was reflecting on is society's aversion to effort. I find this topic so interesting because for many people, effort just means to work harder, or for other people, it can be seen as just being seen trying. Some people see it as only the actions you do, while others see it as it's not always something you can fully see. So while you take time to think about that, let me introduce myself. Hi, my name is Aleja, but you can call me Lay. Welcome back to A Little Atypical, where we dive into all things wellness, personal development, and lifestyle topics. I like to approach typical topics from a not so typical perspective, and that's exactly what we're going to do today. Now, if you missed my New Year's Day episode, I did briefly talk about the energy of this year, from societal indicators to more of a personal mindset. And in general, 2026 is a year of courageous new beginnings, untamed spirit, and stepping into your own light. So, with that type of energy, how can we not talk about effort? Usually, I would go from general to specific, but since what I have to say about effort versus effortlessness takes a bit more research, I actually want to start with the idea from a place of sense of self. Because you know what? It's that time of year when people focus on their quote unquote rebrands. Pinterest boards are locked and loaded with aspirational images, friendships, relationships, health goals, career aspirations, financial wealth, dream vacations, and all the experiences they want to have. But here's what's not talked about enough: the effort they're willing to put into making those visions a reality. And I don't mean to sound judgmental because I know ball. Despite being tuned into the real struggles of the world and society, I choose to have hope. For some, that comes off as naive or delusional, but what I'm saying is this: knowing what you want is just part of the journey. Honestly, I think when it comes to manifestations, we should use the same method journalists use for articles because, they have the five whys. In this case, the who and the what are self explanatory, but how should be about how can I contribute to that manifestation action wise, monthly, weekly, daily, heck, within the next hour. Okay? The when should be about when can I do those actions, not when will my manifestations come to fruition. Where should be in relation to where can I find the information, support, resources I need to take these actions. And why should be so strong. There is no excuse you could tell yourself that would stop you from doing what you need to do. I think the idea of things being effortless is an illusion. And here's why. Effort isn't only physical action. Effort can be research. It could be unlearning, relearning. The reason we discredit effort so much is because we have this societal perception of work where we deem things as quote unquote real work or not, based on our own skill sets and tolerances. I was reading a fashion article from Vogue, and I found it fascinating, especially because, fashion is often perceived as very surface level along with beauty. But articles like this reveal the humanity, psychology, and beliefs that people often dismiss when it comes to these subjects. And I wanted to share some of the quotes that really stood out to me. Quote 1: the idea that style should be effortless, that it should simply exist without labor or consideration, has been a long prevailing narrative in fashion. For decades, the industry has co opted the idea that true style is instinctual and immune to overthinking, but we can purchase our way into effortlessness with a few key pieces that brands and editors encourage us to buy: the off-duty model, the chic Parisian, and the elusive quote-unquote cool girl all serves as archetypes, reinforcing the belief that style is something one simply has. But if there's one thing the current era of fashion discourse has revealed, is that effortlessness is often an illusion. Style, as it turns out, is work. Quote 2: In a world where personal branding is super important, effortlessness represents an ability to rise above this culture of incessant optimization. Even if the look is carefully crafted, it still gives the illusion of not having to try, and that illusion is powerful. Quote 3. Amani Randolph, a model and creator, recalls her mom upbringing in the Bronx where effort wasn't hidden, it was celebrated. For them, Randolph noted, effort is not just about looking good, it's a sign of pride. Quote 4. Research suggests that individuals who believe skills like style are fixed rather than developed are less likely to invest effort into cultivating personal taste. Next quote. Wealth, access, and time shape how one curates their looks. Women of a certain status has always had help curating their wardrobes, Johnson says, referencing personal stylists and inherited wardrobes. Privilege often manifests the most in the off-duty model aesthetic, a look deeply tied to Eurocentric beauty standards that further pushes the narrative of unattainable ease. Next quote. My father has always had effortless style and he grew up poor, shares Kwan. For him, effort came from observation through watching films and paying attention to culture. And the last quote I wanted to share was, the truth is, effort is always present whether or not it's visible. It now takes me 3 to 5 minutes to select a look because I've already done the work in curating my wardrobe, says Kwan. The effort was already put in when I purchased the item and put in my wardrobe. Style is more than just dressing up. It's about making a deliberate effort to connect with what resonates with you personally and wearing clothes that feel authentic to you. This article is called The Myth of Effortless Style by Daisy Maldonado. I am so sorry I butchered the last name. I hope I said it right. But I'll put the link to the article in the description box. I know many of us are in rebrand mode, and a huge part of rebrand is fashion and style. But that article also spoke to the general idea of effort. And I want to talk about this because one of the most frustrating things is when people put things out there online to mislead other people. Because, okay, I really appreciate when people are honest about their struggles. So, a few months back, I can't remember the exact date, I watched a video from a content creator who I probably name a lot, which is Alicia Gogan. And in that video, she talks about how she wants to put effort into herself again. And that video got me thinking about something important, which is how my desire for things to feel effortless actually made me less self-sufficient and more needy. And looking back, that mindset was at the core of my identity crisis. So now that we covered the cultural context of effort versus effortlessness, I don't know why that does not roll off the tongue that well, but anyways, let me share how this played out in my own life. And I'll be honest, I am slightly embarrassed by this example, but you know what? You live and you learn, right? And if sharing my story helps someone else avoid these struggles, then it's worth it. But I've talked about this before, so bear with me. High school me was very relationship focused. I wanted a high school sweetheart because I had this vision of being with just one person, growing together, getting married, having kids, just doing life together. You know, the whole fairy tale. Two things fueled that desire. First, my family dynamic, which I won't get into, but I will say this. At one point, I genuinely believed there was a family curse around love and romance, at least for the women in my family. Second, I had a relative who actually lived that dream. They were together since 8th grade, married, and now, married with kids. And it's wild because these two reasons sit on opposite sides of the same spectrum. So, in my 24 years of living, I've had only one boyfriend. That relationship lasted 4 years officially, five if you count the year we were dating exclusively before making it official. And I know people might have their opinions about that, but I was the one who hesitated to make it official. The truth is, even though I wanted a relationship, I just had so much going on, from personal dramas, major life decisions that would affect me for at least the next 4 years. No, actually, probably longer. And significant mental and emotional struggles that led to therapy and me missing school constantly because just being there made me physically sick. And I'm not trying to be dramatic, that was just the reality. With all that happening, I fundamentally couldn't process or believe that someone could actually like me, let alone love me for years without me knowing, when I was just struggling to feel neutral about myself. I have positive feelings about myself now, but it took a lot to get there. Anyways, that's getting a bit off track. So, I got what I wanted, kind of. Obviously, it didn't work out, but something he said kind of stuck with me even now, which is, quote, I want you to be more needy. So, for context, I was always being too stubborn and refusing to ask anyone for help at the time. But here's the problem: I've always struggled with extremes. So I swung too far in the other direction. I became needy, and that made me less self sufficient. The effort I used to put into myself just wasn't there anymore. Let me break this down into three distinct eras of my life. And I think it really shows how my relationship with effort evolved or devolved over time. The first era I called the BSC era, boyfriend searching era. This ran from, I would say, May 2016. I mean, I was a lover girl. I always had crushes from a young age, but we're gonna just start it there. Covering most of high school. Honestly, this was probably the darkest period of my life mentally. And during that time, I dealt with a lot of bullying. I struggled with severe self hatred and serious food issues. I was under eating as a coping mechanism, though I'd argued that skipping breakfast specifically was more about anxiety because, like I said, just the thought of going to school made me physically ill whether I ate or not. But here's where effort kind of comes in. I was putting so much effort during this time, but just not for the right reasons. At one point, I did get into makeup because one of my best friends at the time and I were blog writing together. I was always more interested in fashion, but since we shared that blog, it all kind of went hand in hand and I got more into makeup. Then at one point, I think it was the summer between 10th and 11th, I actually started working out in the morning before work because I had a summer job. So I would do that, then obviously prepare for work, walk to work, walk home for work, and then sometimes exercising after work too. The only exceptions I would say were Fridays when I usually had plans with my friends, and I didn't really exercise on weekends as far as I remember. I was eating very specific foods, like copying meals from lifestyle YouTubers, and my goal was to at least eat lunch at school instead of just snacking or not eating at all. Because despite everything, I actually did want to get rid of my anxiety around food and eating at school. So when school started again, I'd sometimes participate in gym class, but mostly if we were using the fitness room because I preferred that over actual sports. Because y'all, in high school, people took sports way too seriously, and I honestly didn't care enough about winning or losing because I wasn't really a sports girl. But most days after school, I'd literally exercise in my room from the time I got home. Well, I got home 3 something. So if it was like fast enough, it would be like 3:30, but for the most part it was like 4, and then I would exercise from that time until maybe 5:36. That was happening even when I had gym days at school, which was about 2 or 3 days a week at my school. Though at some point we started using one of those days for health lessons. And looking back at the time, yes, all of this was technically effort I was putting in, but the intention was completely wrong. It was all about control. I was trying to control my body, control how people saw me, control basically anything I could, because everything else in my life felt chaotic and out of my hands. The second era is what I will call the RRA era, which technically would have a double meaning, but in this case means responsibility dash relationship arc era. This was predominantly my college years from August 2019 to May 2023. During this period, I became more self-neutral, which I guess could be considered progress. I also became spiritual at this time, which added another dimension I was trying to navigate. Most of my effort went into adjusting to college life, especially since I really only had one semester before 2020 turned everything upside down. I was focused on schoolwork, my blog, understanding my new friendships, and the shift in my high school friendships, and navigating my first relationship. And that relationship, it caused me so much anxiety because I didn't really know how to be in one, obviously. I was constantly wondering if I was doing enough as a girlfriend and how to actually be a partner to someone. And it was all so new and honestly so stressful. And looking back, I think it was mostly me overthinking and feeling extremely frustrated over what I knew and didn't know about it. And yeah, so this was a time where I questioned everything from beliefs to values, connections with people. There was a shift in family dynamics, there was a death in the family. Everything just felt really heavy. I think there was so much processing happening that it became hard to put effort into myself, or rather, what putting effort in myself actually meant felt hazy, unclear. I was constantly trying to do things like maintaining good grades, staying connected to people, maintaining relationships, both platonic and romantic, and keep up with hobbies, being more spiritual, keeping up with everything happening in the world, trying not to be so self centered. And I was just stretching myself way too thin. And the whole time I felt terrible. One positive thing is my face became less acne prone, but everything else was just overwhelming. Side note, if you are experiencing similar symptoms to the following, please consult with a healthcare professional, because I'm just sharing my experience, but I'm also not a medical expert and everyone's situation is different. But what else was happening to me was my skin, specifically around my neck, would be burning, like irritated, red burning. I gained maybe 55 to 60 pounds since high school. I started to miss my periods for months at a time. I felt dizzy during classes. I was constantly in a bad mood, but trying so hard not to project that onto other people. And so I was just isolating. And even because I was struggling with all these like health things, even if I was like walking with my friends, it was very hard for me to keep up walking with them. And because of all this like emotional shame, because of the physical things happening, it made me want to isolate even more. And of course, I was even afraid about the future. I was going to the doctor so much during this time, trying to get help with these symptoms I was going through. But even with medical support, I still struggled to piece together what was actually happening. And here's where the neediness kind of kicked in, because during that time I felt needy because my effort was going into everything except foundational self-care. I was trying to fix things, but I struggled to identify the real issue until I learned more about health and nutrition. And like I said, obviously not a professional, but learning the basics helped me understand at least a bit more what was going on. And the thing is, because I wasn't putting effort into myself in a way that was actually necessary, because yes, technically all of those things are still effort, but if it's not what you need in that moment, it's just wasted energy. So I became kind of needy in the sense of relationships, and not in a healthy I need support way, but like needy to the point where if people couldn't provide what I needed, I kind of resented them for it. And in my head, it was like, I'm putting all this effort into this connection, but you don't even care about what's happening in my life. But with every problem and complaint you have, I'm giving you my time. Even outside of our interactions, I'm thinking about ways I can help you. And I don't even think you feel the same way about me. And I will say this is part of a larger social problem we have as a society. And in a separate post, I will share more about why I think this happens and how it plays into our sense of community and relates to self care discourse and everything. But, anyways, moving on to the third and current era, which I am calling the PG era, which is post grad era. Self explanatory, not really a creative name, but I digress. This is everything from May 2023 until now, and honestly, I won't consider this era over until maybe 4 or 5 years from when I entered. So maybe about like May 2027 or May 2028, which is crazy because that's literally not that far when you think about it. So my ex moved about 2 months after I graduated, and we broke up 2 months after that in September 2023. I was struggling with my job from August 2023 to November 2023 because I didn't like the skills I was using for that role, though I did like my boss, but I was also having a hard time with the schedule. After that, I really did try to focus on my health a lot more. And honestly, I fear if I hadn't done it then, I'd be in such a different place now. I had tried to start my health journey, I would say, back in January 2022, but being in college at the time, I wasn't really prioritizing it well and I struggled real bad. And I think I was in maintenance mode or just constantly yo-yoing, but working that kind of job that I was working kind of pushed me into an even more unhealthy state. So I feel like the things I did in 2024, like leaving that era and even into 2025, was the first time that effort in my life wasn't for something I had to do or validation or control, but it was really genuine. And it was odd because I think at that point, I realized the concept of effort wasn't the problem. The problem was where I was directing it and why. So, overall, this is what I've come to understand, and I want to be clear that this is just a theory based on my own personal experiences. I think there's something I'm just gonna call the effort neediness cycle that I got trapped in for years. Here's how it works: when you're not putting genuine effort into meeting your own foundational needs, emotional, physical, mental, spiritual, you become dependent on other people to fill those gaps. You become needy, but not in a healthy, interdependent way. You become needy in a way that creates resentment both towards yourself and towards others. This is where it kind of gets a little more complex and why I think it's a societal problem. We've created a culture that's deeply confused about effort and personal responsibility. We're caught between two extremes. One glorifies hustle culture, the other has distorted self care from meeting foundational needs to prioritizing individual comfort above all else. Meanwhile, community care gets discussed as an ideal, but fewer people actually contribute to it. And the result is a society where everyone expects community support without offering it in return. We've become so focused on individual self care that we lost our sense of collective responsibility, and we're so burned out from doing what we think we're supposed to be doing that we don't take personal responsibility for our actual needs, and instead we rely on other people to fill us and regulate things that we aren't even conscious enough to process ourselves. I know that was a lot of words, and I don't know how clear that sounded, but I'm not saying you shouldn't have support from others. Community interdependence and asking for help is all crucial, but personal responsibility is equally important. We need to find a balance so we don't push effort to an extreme or develop negative emotions towards effort itself, because the truth about effort that our culture doesn't want to admit is there is no such thing as true effortlessness. When something looks effortless, it's usually because someone practiced that skill extensively or it was valued in their environment, so they developed it naturally, or they had a related skill that made it easier to pick up on. You know, the effortless aesthetic we see everywhere in fashion, in fitness, transformations, in those picture perfect social media lives, it's almost always the result of hidden, consistent effort. This relates directly to glow up and rebrand culture we're seeing everywhere, especially around the New Year's. People want to manifest a new version of themselves, rebrand their entire lives, have this dramatic transformation, but so many of these attempts fail because they're missing the effort component, or they're directing effort at the wrong things, like the aesthetics, the external markers, rather than the actions needed, the foundational needs of those things. And in the BSC era, I was putting effort into control because I felt out of control. But that effort wasn't addressing my actual needs. It was just a band aid on a much deeper wound, and I was trying to create an external transformation without doing the internal work. In the RA era, I was putting effort into everything: school, relationships, hobbies, spirituality, keeping up with the world, but not into foundational things that my body and mind needed. So I became increasingly needy in terms of my relationships because I was looking to other people to provide what I should have been providing for myself. And when they couldn't or wouldn't, I resented them for it. And this is where the societal imbalance really shows up in my life, because I've absorbed all this message that community and connection should be able to meet my needs, but I wasn't holding up my end by taking responsibility for my foundational care. And the cycle looks like this: lack of genuine self directed effort leads to unmet foundational needs, which leads to increased neediness in relationships, which leads to resentment when others can't meet those needs, which leads to even less energy to put in yourself, and the cycle repeats and deepens. And societally, we're stuck in this same cycle, swinging between do everything yourself and your community should do things for you, without finding this middle ground. And so what I learned is effort is the main antidote to neediness. Not effort for all those other things, not effort in a performative way, but genuine, consistent effort directed at your actual foundational needs. This doesn't have to mean you don't need people. It means you show up for yourself so that when you do lean on others, it's from a place of healthy interdependence rather than desperation or resentment. Breaking out of that cycle required me to redirect my efforts back to myself, but in a genuine way, because I actually needed to take care of myself if I wanted to show up as the person I wanted to be, both for myself and for others. And I had to accept that this would require sustained effort. There was no hack, no shortcut, no way to make anything effortless. And this is why so many glow ups and rebrands fail or feel hollow. People want transformation without the effort. A true glow up, a genuine rebrand, requires you to put consistent effort into meeting your own needs, so you're operating from a place of wholeness rather than lack. It requires you to develop a healthy relationship with effort itself, not avoiding it, not overdoing it, but applying it consistently to what matters. And here's the thing about New Year's and new beginnings: they give us permission to break these cycles. They give us a moment to say, I'm going to redirect my effort now. I'm going to put it towards what actually matters. I'm going to find that balance between personal responsibility and healthy interdependence. I'm going to accept that real transformation requires real effort, and that's okay. And that's what I started doing late 2023 into 2024, and it just completely changed my life. Not because effort itself was new to me, but because genuine effort directed at my actual needs was new. because finding balance between self-sufficiency and community support was new to me. And accepting that nothing worthwhile is truly effortless was new to me. The distinction between authentic needs and neediness is also crucial to this discussion because authentic needs are foundational. It is your physical health, your emotional processing, mental reset, meaningful connections, purpose, and growth. Everyone has them, and there's no shame in that. Neediness, however, emerges when we neglect our own foundational needs and expect others to fill that gap. It's resentment that builds when people can't read our minds or fix what we haven't addressed ourselves. When you're not putting genuine effort in your own care, you become emotionally dependent. In my RA era, I needed my relationships to do that for me, to validate me, to make me feel better, to solve my problems. Even when people tried to help, it was not enough. It was never enough because the real issue is that I wasn't doing the foundational work only I could do. And this emotional dependency hurts everyone because people can feel when you're leaning on them in an unsustainable manner. Eventually, they pull away or you resent them for not carrying things the same way you are. And January is that moment for that reflection, that honest self assessment. And I've done a lot of content on this already, but for this specifically, ask yourself, where am I being needy versus having authentic needs I'm not addressing? Where am I expecting others to fill the gaps I should be filling myself? Where have I been directing my effort, and is it actually serving my foundational needs? And this is also where manifestation and personal rebranding comes into play because many people approach New Year's wanting to manifest a better life or rebrand themselves, but without addressing your needs first, these attempts feel hollow, unsustainable, and true manifestation isn't just about visualizing what you want to become. It's about putting in the effort to become that person who naturally attracts and maintains those things. Personal rebranding is not just a new aesthetic or a set of goals. It's the result of genuinely meeting your own needs and showing up as the most authentic version of yourself. And when you break the effort neediness cycle, manifestation and rebranding happens so organically. As we start 2026, just remember effort is not the enemy, it's the solution. When it's genuine effort directed at your needs, okay? The neediness many of us struggle with isn't a character flaw, it's just a symptom of unmet needs and misdirected efforts. You don't need to overhaul your life on January 1st. Start small, be consistent, choose effort over motivation, and watch what happens when you show up for yourself the way you've been waiting for someone else to show up for you. That's basically my hope for 2026, not perfection or massive overnight transformation, just genuine, consistent efforts. New year, new efforts. Let's make it count. So that is all I wanted to say in terms of effort for this episode. But before we close out, it is time for something a little different than I'm used to doing. But I am still doing a card pull of the episode, but I wanted to draw some inspo from journal pages. So I want to list my currents as inspo just to try something new. Okay, so currently I am reading Safety Net by Deanna Gray, watching My ID is Gangnam Beauty, drinking hot chocolate, eating avocado toast. That's something I had a lot recently. Loving working on my podcast plan for 2026. Hating. Okay, the list is kind of long for this one. So I'm just going to choose the least controversial thing and say the discourse on Book Talk about whether or not it's realistic to read 100 books in a year. That conversation happens every year, and I'm sick of it. Every single year. Please get that off of my feed. Thank you. But anyways, trying to answer more reflection questions to see where I'm at mentally and emotionally, and feeling at peace with myself, which if I were to say what I'm grateful for, it would be this emotion. Now it's time for the card pull. If card readings are not your thing or not something you personally align with, but you still like other aspects of my content, thank you for listening this far. And be sure to come back this upcoming Thursday and follow the podcast to stay up to date about new releases. So, the card deck we're using for this is the Moonology deck again, and the card we got was Full Moon in Taurus. Your dreams need a practical plan. Sometimes you need to weave a bit of magic, and sometimes you need to be practical, and sometimes you need to find a combination of the two. This card suggests that is where you are now. You need to use the law of attraction to draw in what you want by imagining it, expecting it, welcoming it, but you need to balance it with it taking down to earth steps towards your goals. This isn't about wishing on the moon and hoping for the best. It's about making something like a list of bullet points about how to achieve your dreams. If you're asking about money, this card hurled a change of financial fortunes depending on both your past actions and what you're expecting and therefore attracting. Attuned to the moon. Write down 10 things you know are wonderful about you. Additional meanings for this card. Laziness could explain your current situation. If so, change that and own it. Chasing money doesn't work. You need to chase a dream. Jealousy or envy create negative energy and attract negativity. More exercise is called for. The teaching. The full moon in Taurus is a time to get back to earth, to get grounded, to work through any negative feelings you've been dealing with, and to find a balance between being passionate and being overly intense. Money issues may come to a head at the time of the full moon in Taurus, but you can take this card as a sign to pay more attention to your cash flow no matter when you draw it. So this card literally flew across the carpet when I was shuffling for this episode, and honestly, that tracks because this card isn't just about actionable steps. Every single additional meaning connects directly back to effort, which is exactly what we've been talking about this entire episode. So, a quick breakdown. The first additional meaning mentions laziness, and while I don't really believe in laziness as a character trait, I do think people often hold back their full effort as a form of self-preservation. Like, if I don't try my hardest, I can't truly fail. But the thing is, that mindset treats failure as an ending instead of what it actually is, which is part of the process. Or people see someone else having seemingly effortless success and use that as an excuse to not genuinely try. And both of these are examples of misdirected effort born from neediness, needing external validation or needing to protect your ego instead of genuine effort towards your needs. The second meaning about chasing dreams instead of money, that's literally what I've been talking about with redirecting your efforts. Effort itself is not the problem, it's how you're directing it. And when you chase external validation or quick fixes instead of addressing your foundational needs, you're going to start to resent effort because it's misguided. Third one obviously warns against jealousy and envy, creating negative energy. And yeah, those emotions are rooted in comparison and scarcity thinking, which absolutely ruins your efforts and create blockages. They're just symptoms of operating from a place of neediness rather than being whole. And of course, the fourth one about exercise is self-explanatory. But here is my side note. If your goal is to get healthier or to become more athletic this year, more fit this year, whatever term you want to use, the key to making it sustainable is to stop worrying about how long it will take. The biggest reason people fail or revert back is urgency. They kind of cheapen their efforts by doing extremes instead of making gradual adjustments, giving themselves time to adapt and maintain those changes before adding more. And that's basically the principles we were talking about earlier. So this card really does reflect everything we discussed today, and it's your sign to be grounded in your effort and break the cycles. You know, everyone has authentic needs because that's just being human, but neediness, that's just happens when you're not putting in effort to meet those needs. And this card is reminding us that in 2026, We need both the magic, aka the vision, the intention, and the practical plan, the consistent effort. And that's how you'll transform to get the life you want. And that's all for today. Thank you for tuning into today's episode of A Little Atypical. If you found this helpful, don't forget to subscribe and share this with someone who might need to hear this message. Remember to view the description box where you can find important links such as the one to my website where there is so much more bonus content, and also the one to my Substack because I'm posting more on there. Until next time, have a good day, evening, or night, and stay authentically atypical. Okay, bye.